Last season, Sam Howell started every game for the Commanders. Now he's the Seahawks backup, and his pretty much non-existent chance to beat out Geno Smith for the starting role has pretty much already sailed. It hasn't been a great start to training camp for him, but he's also had a golden opportunity to get some first-team reps. Howell can be a solid quarterback at times, but look, there's obviously a reason why Washington traded him. He's apparently had his struggles at training camp. He was reported to be alarmingly inaccurate after day 3, and that he was much closer to fighting PJ Walker for the backup spot than to fighting Geno Smith for the starter spot. I think it would have been a little ridiculous to think that Howell was actually going to go to Seattle and steal the starting job from Geno. Geno definitely wasn't as good last season as he was in 2022, but was definitely still better than Howell. I think Howell had some really good flashes that really did just make him so much fun to watch as a Washington fan, but Geno was still way better. If you break down the numbers, Howell played in 2 more games and only had 1 more touchdown pass, but 12 more picks. Of course, he led the league. It is somewhat important to mention, though, the big difference between the play styles. Howell definitely is more mobile and did rush for 5 touchdowns too. Geno only had 1. I had a ton of fun watching Howell, but anyone with eyes that watched the 2 play could tell you that Geno was still better. He's also proven he's been a solid starter over the last 2 years. He had that 30 touchdown season, followed it up with 20 last season. He's played well, replacing Russell Wilson for the most part. He came into the offseason as the expected starter, and I'll bet that he's the week 1 starter. I'd say the Seahawks traded for Howell for a reason, but it's not like they gave up much for him. It was really just a double pick swap, nothing crazy. Seattle got a 4th and a 6th back, and they gave up a 3rd and a 5th. So basically, they moved back around for 2 picks to get a guy that did have a ton of hype around him in college and has started an entire NFL season at this point. And maybe the Seahawks think he's going to keep getting better, or that he'll just be better in a decent situation. Things were really messy last year for Howell. The Commanders' offensive line was horrendous, and Eric Bieniemy was the play caller, and Ron Rivera was a sitting duck head coach, probably just trying to win and save his job, not try to develop a 5th-round pick. There were a ton of problems around him, and Seattle is probably a better situation if he ever gets the chance to play. For now, it doesn't look like that'll be the case anytime soon, but if Geno gets hurt, Howell is the next guy up. Geno has missed a chunk of training camp due to an injury, but lucky for the Seahawks, his tests on his knee and hip didn't show any major damage. Still, he had to miss time, and that's led to Howell getting a good bit of first-team reps. I mean, this really was his big shot. The starter's out, he gets to play the important reps, and still, it was a lot like it was in Washington. He'd show some incredible flashes and look great, but at other times, he's extremely inaccurate. Whenever he puts together a good stretch of throws, one truly awful play is well on its way. It's the exact way he played in Washington, and I bet it'll be the exact same if he gets to see the field for the Seahawks. The fact is, it does make him extremely fun to watch. Going from watching Taylor Heineke, who is maybe my favorite quarterback I've gotten to watch outside of RG3 on Washington, to going to Sam Howell was just insane. They both play a ridiculous way of football that's fun, but completely unsustainable and not good enough to win a championship. The same boneheaded struggles are still a thing in Seattle too. The overthrows and horrible misses are now the Seahawks' issue, not the Commanders. I do think Howell is a guy I would have been fine with Washington giving another year just to see how much he could develop. Howell did get 2 years in Washington, but he only really started last season, and it simply just wasn't good enough. He had 21 touchdowns, but also 21 interceptions. I think it's still worth pointing out that he is super young. He's older than Jaden Daniels, but only by about 3 months. That's not a big age gap at all. Meanwhile, Howell already has 2 seasons in the NFL under his belt. But Jaden is a fresh start. They did both start college at the same time, 2019. Both immediately started. Howell played 3 seasons at UNC and then got drafted. Jaden played 3 seasons at Arizona State before he transferred to LSU. Another year of Howell could have been interesting, but I don't think the Commanders could pass up the chance to take Jaden or Drake May. There may have been a bit of a sour taste and Washington just not want to take another UNC quarterback like Drake, but Jaden is a fantastic prospect. Howell's best year in college was as a freshman when he had 38 touchdowns and only 7 interceptions, but he slowly declined, and it did hurt that he lost so much talent around him. But Jaden has continued to get better and is fresh off of his best year with 40 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions. He just won the Heisman for a reason. He was literally the best player in the country and already has the Joe Burrow transfer to LSU Heisman arc. Washington missed out on Burrow by 1 pick, and now they get the next stud LSU quarterback. A lot of fans loved Howell, and that's ultimately why you trade him, right? The second Jaden struggles, you don't want people calling for Howell to start. It's Jaden's team now, and Marcus Mariota is a good backup behind him just in case. I think it's reasonable to think that Howell is going to start at some point this season for the Seahawks. Almost every quarterback ends up missing time, at least a game every year, but Geno and Howell do have a pretty good track records recently. Howell played in every game last season. Geno played in every game 2 seasons ago. He only missed 2 last year. If he ends up missing time again, even if it's just for a game, we'll probably get to see Howell back on the field. The Seahawks do only have 3 quarterbacks on the roster, and all of them have pretty good experience starting. That's really a great situation to be in. PJ Walker has started 9 games over the last 4 seasons, so he can definitely play if Seattle needs him to. I think the Seahawks trading for Sam Howell really boils down to 2 different reasons. One, it didn't cost much to get him at all. The Seahawks needed another quarterback on the roster, and he's still cheap on a rookie deal, and the draft capital they traded for him wasn't too bad at all. Then there's the development aspect, which is the big one. Howell was once in the conversation to be a first overall pick. Of course, that all came crashing down, but the hype for him before his junior year was insane. Trust me, I know. I went to Virginia Tech, and the first game of the 2021 season was against UNC at Lane Stadium. He was a Heisman favorite, North Carolina ranked number 10. You've probably seen the clip of everyone jumping to Enter Sandman before the game because it was like right after COVID, so fans didn't even get to go to games the year before. It was insane, and Tech upset UNC. We rushed the field. It was sick. That's really my favorite sporting event I've ever been to in my entire life, and of course, Howell then became the starting quarterback for my NFL team. That Tar Heel team just wasn't as good. Howell had to do it all, and he still had those same tools. He's still really young though, and it makes a lot of sense why a team would want to take a shot on him. At one point, it looked like he could be the next big thing in Washington even. Of course, that wasn't the case, but I think he could still be a really good NFL backup. The Howell situation reminds me a bit of the Jaguars or Texans situations where they landed Gardner Minshew and Davis Mills. Both showed promise, but were probably destined to be good career backups. That's been mostly the case, and they both ended up with high draft picks and couldn't pass up the chance to take Trevor Lawrence at 1 or CJ Stroud at 2. It's worked out better for both. Howell definitely could still develop into a good NFL quarterback, and the situation does feel a little similar to when the Cowboys traded a 4th rounder for Trey Lance. He's stuck on the bench not playing behind Dak Prescott, but he had a weird contract situation, so you never know, and why not take a shot on a guy that has a ton of potential? Granted, he's only started 4 games in his NFL career, but he was still the 3rd overall pick for a reason. It's like the Broncos moving down around in a pick swap to get Zach Wilson. None of these dudes may ever turn to anything, but they are young and it's worth taking a shot. If the Seahawks struggle to get another high pick anytime soon, you'll at least be developing a quarterback. Geno is only 33, but he's also only under contract through next season. There is a legitimate window for Sam Howell to become the Seahawks starter one day, but right now, it just doesn't look good. But who knows what an extra year of sitting and learning could do for him.